Alright, what's going on, guys? It's Kyle again. Welcome back to youtube.com/FPS. And today I got some Grand Theft Auto footage for you, and I think I'm a pretty good driver. Let me know if I'm okay or not. I know some people say they can't even drive down the street. I think I'm a pretty decent driver. Let me know what you think. I'm seriously curious about your opinions based on your personal driving skills. So, this is going to be a story time episode, and I promised I'd do some of these when I first started the channel and even before the channel started. And the number one request is usually a story about my dad. For those of you who don't know, my dad has lived a kind of a cool life, kind of a real life badass kind of guy who's done a lot of interesting things and is just an interesting guy in his own right. But before I told you any like just straight up dad stories, I thought I should tell you a Porty story. Now, some of you are probably wondering, what's a Porty story? So, Porty is short for Porterfield, and Porterfield was my dad's brother-in-law. And Porty was just an idiot, okay? You know, this guy was ridiculous. So let me just give you a little background story about Porty. He's the kind of guy that would get just completely shit-faced drunk, and most of this happened in the 70s and 80s. He'd get completely shit-faced drunk, and then he'd get violent. And he knew he couldn't beat anyone up, so he'd always go after my dad. Now, that doesn't make much sense to me, but my dad explains it this way. He says, Porty knew that I wouldn't hurt him. Not like I would, hurt anyone else. He knew that I'd put him in his place if I needed to, but I wouldn't beat him into a pulp, I wouldn't send him to the emergency room or anything like that. So one particular night, Porty had been drinking pretty heavy. He was at a some relative's house. I don't know. People down here move around to each other's houses and hang out a lot. So he's at someone's house and he's just wasted, and he's becoming violent and yelling, and they want him to leave their house. So they call my dad. They're like, "Hey, Porty's over here. He's drunk. He won't leave. He's belligerent. Will you come get him? We don't want to call the police on this guy." So Dad's like, "Sure, I'll come get him." So he goes to the house. He walks in, and there's Porty, shit-faced drunk, shirtless, holding a rifle in his hands, and he starts cursing at my dad immediately. But before my dad can even tell him why he's there, he's like, "Oh, fuck you! You always treat me like shit." He's in his crazy drunken redneck accent that he had, going on and on about how he's mad at my dad. He points the gun at my dad, and he pulls the trigger. Snap! Gun doesn't go off. Now, as you can imagine, this infuriated my father to no end. This man literally just tried to kill him. But he's family, You don't treat this the same way you would treat a stranger in the street who tried to kill you. You might kill him back if he did that. You would definitely call the cops, right? Well, not in this case. Dad rushes him, grabs the rifle away from him, and immediately hits him with the butt of it in the forehead. Splits his forehead wide open, gets him on the ground, hits him 3 or 4 times, knocks him unconscious, drags him out, puts him in the car, drives him home. Guy wakes up the next day, doesn't remember shit. He calls my dad. He's like, "What happened last night?" He's like, "My head's busted open. I'm all beat up." Dad's like, "Yeah, you got into a tussle with a couple of big guys. Don't worry, I helped you out of it. Those guys aren't going to mess with you anymore. I wouldn't be drinking around them anymore, though." He's like, "Oh, thanks, man. You're always there for me." So that's the kind of guy Porty is, okay? So now that you've got that in mind, you know that when he gets drunk, he gets ridiculous. This next story will make a little more sense. So they're at some hangout one night, some bar, restaurant, something like that, where everybody hangs out in the parking lot and meets girls, whatever you do back in the 70s and 80s. And Porty's drunk again. Dad's driving a late 60s Corvette convertible, and Porty has a knife. And for some reason, like I said, he always wants to go after my dad. So he decides he's going to stab Dad. Second time he's tried to murder my father. Starts chasing my dad with this knife. "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you." There's no joke in his voice. There's no, "Yeah, that's Porty, always pretending to stab people." No. Porty's trying to stab my dad. My dad starts running around and around the car, and Porty's chasing him. What else do you do when somebody's chasing you with a knife? So round and round they go. All the while, my dad's trying to negotiate. "Porty, you better stop. You better stop, Porty. I'm going to have to hurt you. Stop it, Port. Stop it." So On the fourth lap, my dad stops, reaches into the back seat of the convertible, grabs his acoustic guitar, and waits. And just like a scene out of Looney Tunes when that dumb dog runs around the corner and Foghorn Leghorn lays him out with a pan, my dad smashes this guitar right across the guy's face, knocks him unconscious for the second time that I'm aware of, right there in the parking lot with like 30 people watching. Everybody's laughing their ass off. Once again, put him in the car, drive him home. Next day, lie to him again. What happened last night? Oh, you got into it, Port. You picked a fight with a couple of big old boys, but don't worry. I sorted them right out for you. Ah, thanks, man. You're the best friend ever. And that's how Porty was. That's kind of how he lived his life, not really remembering what he'd done the night before, and he was usually for the best that he didn't. And but I think my favorite Porty story that involved my dad a bit involved a rock quarry cable swing. So this is a deep hole in the ground where they mine granite. And all too often, because they're digging right into solid rock, it basically creates the world's biggest swimming pool you can imagine. These things are really, really big. And there's a ledge at the top with, it varies, but in this particular case, it was about 20 or 30 feet down to the water, and the water was an additional 30 or 40 feet deep. And there was a big I-beam that hung over this rock quarry, and my dad had crawled out on the I-beam over the water, tied a big cable to it, and then secured a piece of string to that cable that could be used to retrieve the cable every time someone had swung out across the rock quarry into the water. And so all the young people would go do this. I mean, there were 17. There were people who were like 17, 18. There were people who were like 30, and they're all hanging out, having a good time at the rock quarry, drinking and swinging, going out in the water. Well, the string they used that I just described to bring the cable back was brick mason cord. Now, if you don't know anything about brick mason cord, it's a really strong, low gauge, which means small, string. And it's really strong, and it gets really taut, and it's used to lay bricks in a straight line for a foundation or a wall. And it was perfect for this. Well, just like a Looney Tunes character, I think Porty could have been a good Looney Tunes character. He is standing right in the coil of brick mason cord, just as a guy swings out over the rock quarry. Now, if you can imagine, 200-pound man swinging on a cable, suddenly the brick mason cord wrapped round and around Porty's foot, and it drags him foot first over the rock quarry, where he is left to dangle by this small, thin cord, which is, not... Think of fishing line. Think of something like that. This stuff sucks. It's the ultimate rope burn. It cut his foot so deeply and so badly, they thought he was gonna lose the fucking foot. And because this was, the 70s, there was no hospital trip. There's no money for that. It was all home remedies. They were using potatoes and tomatoes and like poultices, or what is it? Poultices. Just weird home remedies to try to heal the infection in this guy's foot. He nearly lost it. So that's Porty for you. That's my Porty story. Hope you guys like this. Let me know if you like this style of video. I've got a lot of stories like this, and I'd like to share them. So hope you guys enjoyed. Be sure to leave me a comment if you want to win this week's prize, and if you want to know what this week's prize is, just look in the comments. I'm sure somebody could help you out. I announced it on Painkiller already tonight.